Greenlight Network presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Podcast. We're here with our man Achilles Rain. We're going to do our NFL season recaps a week late, but more knowledgeable after a week of, maybe it was a depressing week, our first week without football, and we couldn't get on track. So that was why we weren't here last week, but we're going to be here for the rest of the recaps, and then we'll get into some draft stuff. So Achilles, are you ready to get into some season recaps here?
Yep, I'm finally out of my cave. I think that I can continue living now with the fact that the season's over, but I'm ready to get into the offseason and talk about how some of these teams did.
Yeah, all right. So we're going to start out with your conference, the Nfc West. We did this because there was some moving and shaking going on in the Nfc West, and we wanted to get this out here. But we'll start out up north, work our way through the south. So we're going to start off with the Seattle Seahawks. All right, you ready to get into some Seattle Seahawks season recap?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, the Seahawks had a bit of a weird season. Started off as a high offensive team, really gung-ho, and couldn't defend. And then somewhere about the midpoint, a little later than the midpoint, the offense went away, and the defense started to play well. I think there might have been about a 3-game stretch there where they were pretty solid on both ends of the ball. But by the end of the year, that offense really couldn't do anything at all. They finished 12-4 and lost in the wild card round to your Los Angeles Rams. What did you make of this Seattle Seahawks sort of Jekyll and Hyde, or I don't know if it's Jekyll and Hyde, but the offense certainly was Jekyll and Hyde through the season?
Well, I mean, it was a very odd situation for them. Now, we do expect the Seattle Seahawks kind of going into every season that they're going to have really good offense because of Russell Wilson, things like that. But Seattle's also known for that defense. That defense is basically what makes that team. That's the reason they got to that Super Bowl and everything. But this season was really weird because, like you said, they started off really hot offensively with no defense whatsoever. They had one of the worst defenses in the league. And then they moved on, started playing a little bit better defensively. And that offense, the offensive line was just horrible. They gave up so many sacks, gave up a lot of pressure. It caused Wilson to kind of scramble and get out of the pocket a lot, which is not what he likes to really do, even though he's capable of doing it. So give him fits, and that's one of the reasons why they were, in the wild card round and out back home.
Yeah. I think some of it can be attributed defensive-wise is they made that trade for Jamal Adams, and he came over and then got hurt right off the bat in that first game, and that defense was just really poor until he came back, and then he was really solid, and then he got hurt again towards the end of the year. But the defense seemed to have righted itself. They made a nice trade for Carlos Dunlap on the end, so they could at least get some pass pressure there. But overall, what did you make of the just drop in offense? Do you think it was first half of the season they were doing their wide open, spread, run and gun type offense, and then Pete Carroll, who we both probably know is not that type of offensive coach. He likes the ground and pound. He likes a balanced offense. He likes to play till that fourth quarter, those last 5 minutes, and then we're going to win this game. So do you think it's coaching? Do you think just personnel started to, die out? I mean, really, if you look at Russell Wilson, we were talking offensive, MVP, and, we had every announcer going, why hasn't he ever gotten an MVP? And you're like, well, because there's a guy every year who's better than he is. And, and then by the end, we're now in the offseason, and we're like, is Russell Wilson even going to stay with the Seattle Seahawks?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation for them. To me, what really, transpired this season for them was we noticed that they're not what they used to be. And it happens to every single, Super Bowl caliber type team. They go through their ups and their really highs, and then eventually it comes time to start paying people, and that completely changes the whole dynamic of the team. It seems like the only other team that's been able to consistently do that was the Patriots with Tom Brady, but obviously that ship has moved on, and you saw what happened during the Super Bowl situation. So um, it's happened to the Seahawks, and it became apparent, I think, in the season. They had really bad defense to start off. They didn't run the type of offense that Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson would like to run, which is, more ground focused and playing solid defense. And I think, even though it was a successful season, I think they're probably a bit disappointed that it ended the way it did.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, though, I think a lot of teams would like to be disappointed going 12-4 and making it to the playoffs. But, Seattle wise, I think, I don't know what about week 8 to 10, I think we thought they were probably the best team in the NFC and at least co-favorite to be a Super Bowl contender. And then just somehow their defense got better and they seem to get worse as a team overall. And I don't think by the end we thought they were a Super Bowl contender at all. I think both you and me, even with what was going up there with the Los Angeles Rams behind center, either a pinned Goff or a psychotic quarterback who likes to lead with his head, I think we both thought the the Los Angeles Rams were favored there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like I said, it was probably a disappointing season overall, but like you said, there's plenty of teams that would like to be in their position. Now it gets a little sketchy as we get into the offseason. I believe that right now they have a projected cap space of around 4.3 million or so, which is like 17th in the NFL. So they're gonna have to figure some things out in order to either keep this type of defense consistent, which is they got really good towards the end of the season, but also to get Russell Wilson some help, because if you can't keep that guy upright, you're not going to win many games, no matter how good he is.
Yeah. They do have actually about 11 to 14 million in cap space off of some cuts that they just made. So they will be able to sort of make maybe a little bit of move. The problem comes is Shaquille Griffin is their number one cornerback, maybe number 2, but I think he's probably the best cornerback they have. He's a free agent this year. Now, you can go the track where you franchise him, but I don't know if they will do that with a cornerback. It's very sketchy. You pay him, and then you can't franchise him again, and then you have to pay him basically the next year. But overall, free agent-wise, you got Shaquille Griffin, you got Chris Carson, you got KJ Wright, probably the biggest 3 free agents. They drafted a rookie linebacker who played solid. He was definitely more solid towards the end of the season than the beginning of the season, but they might be able to let KJ Wright go and let Jordan Brooks take over. Once he got over his injury and in there, he really sort of started to stabilize that defense. So what do you make of KJ Wright? He's been a long mainstay, certainly in pass coverage for the Seattle Seahawks. Do you think they bring him back, or do you think it's probably time to let KJ go?
Yeah, I mean, as far as KJ Wright's concerned, he's been a pretty good guy, but I think that at this time, he's already stated the fact that he's not going to give them a hometown discount. He stated that if he would like to stay there, but he wants to get paid, and I don't blame the guy. Ultimately that's what it comes down to is, these guys are here to make money, and that's obviously what they're going to do before their time's up. So I don't blame him for that, but at what he's going to be asking for on the market, I think that it's probably best to move on at this point.
Yeah, especially since theoretically you drafted his replacement in the off season. I was curious about Chris Carson. He's been a solid running back. Injuries have been his main problem, mostly these last handful of years. What would be your probably maybe price range that you'd bring Chris Carson in? Or do you think running backs dime a dozen, go find somebody second, third, fourth round of the draft? We could plug and play. They also have a handful, a couple other guys that, I wouldn't call spectacular back there, but can sort of handle it if they push comes to shove and they don't draft anybody.
Well, I mean, they do have some choices to make when it comes to the running back position. They obviously have the Carson situation, and then they have Carlos Hyde, who also played pretty well, sporadically from time to time, but he played well when he was on the field. But they also kind of have to figure out what they're going to do with Rashad Penny, who they drafted in the first round a little while back, and they have to find out whether he's going to make that rotation and kind of work his way into a starting job because financially speaking, you'd rather have these young guys who are going to cost you a lot less. That way you can take some of that money and invest it elsewhere because they do have some holes to fill, especially if they plan on making another Super Bowl run next season.
Yeah, I think Chris Carson's probably destined for free agency. I wouldn't look for them to really bring him back. The Penny situation's interesting because when he plays, he's been really a solid, explosive back, but injuries have just sort of crippled his career so far. I don't know how much of it was, a smoke screen by both sides, but I guess we probably should touch on the quarterback situation and Russell Wilson. Russell made some comments. There's been, I don't know, let's go rumors about him, being traded. But how serious did you take those rumors? I mean, if you could drop that number, he certainly would free up a lot of cap space.
Yeah, but I mean, realistically, you can't. We've seen it happen before. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, but we've seen situations where like marquee, big key name players end up, getting sent elsewhere, or just plain cut. And the only way that ever really happens is when there's already someone else, on that roster that is projected to be like the next face of the franchise. You don't just move on from a guy like Russell Wilson without any type of set in stone piece. And I don't think they have that right now. Even with some of the really good players they have, I don't think they have anybody who kind of can be that face of the franchise like Russell Wilson. So I don't really think that rumor has much validity behind it, but I mean, it could happen. I'm not going to say it won't, but it's highly doubtful in my opinion.
Yeah. I will touch on this because this is probably the division that most represents this sort of split mentality in the NFL right now between at least the good sort of teams. You have teams like Seattle and Green Bay and New England who build it sort of old school style and are very thrifty. Let's go thrifty with their money and don't really go over the salary cap. Always leave that little room like they have right now so they can sort of maneuver around. You have the other side, which you just saw Tampa Bay pretty much do, where they went all in and just started throwing money and pretty much said, be damned the cap. We'll get to the next two teams who essentially have gone with the same idea of that in the Niners and the Rams, who have both, the Niners got hurt with it last year because all their guys got hurt, which makes it very difficult. But I'm curious what side you're on. Before we get to the Rams, I mean, we'll get to them because they're certainly going the all-in style. But do you like the old school style, the Seattle style, the Green Bay style, the New England style, where you're sort of smart with your money, you're finding deals, you're building a whole roster with a lot of depth? Or do you like this new style that a lot of teams like the Saints, Tampa Bay, the Rams are all sort of, we're throwing money. We don't care about the salary cap. We'll figure it out in a year or two, and we'll just maneuver around that. Do you like that style, or do you like this old school style that probably ran from, the mid-2000s until the last couple years?
See, I think that when it comes to that type of mentality, and that's let's put all our money in right now and, just try to spend as much as we can. We'll figure things out later. When it comes to that type of mentality, I think that it's more for let's win a championship within this window. And then you have the old school style, which we're calling it, which is more of a let's build a franchise, and that's what you have with.
I say old school style, and it's probably been adopted the last 16 years for us.
Yeah, but hey, the NFL changes and it changes quick, so that's probably it feels old school now. because everything seems to be changing now. I prefer like the old school method more. I prefer in building a solid foundation and building like a really good competitive team for years to come. But there's something to be said about the teams that kind of put all their chips in at one moment, and I think it's really depending on their situation. The Rams, for example, they just left St. Louis. They moved to the second largest market in the nation, in Los Angeles, and they really started to kind of set themselves in as the team in California. So they really need to make a bang. They've got this new stadium. The Super Bowl is going to be held in LA. They're going to have Olympics in LA. LA's kind of talked about within the sports community right now. So for them, a situation of let's just go all in now makes sense to me. Um, Now, do I like it? I don't like it, but it makes sense. I understand why they would do it. So if I had to pick, I would pick more old school, but I understand why certain teams have, chosen to go the other route.
Yeah, I think I'm a little more old school, but that just might be because I grew up on it and I watched, a handful of these teams dominate that way. But I think a little bit of that style is what played into these Russell Wilson rumors is, Russell probably unhappy with the offense, probably more unhappy with getting crushed by the offensive line more than anything. And, he said something and, it probably crosses Seattle's mind like, really with our style of play, we could probably find a quarterback to, manage this. And if we get our run game going and our defense going, we could probably have a pretty cheap quarterback behind here and, save $40 million in cap space every year and build, a lot of depth and a lot of team. I don't know if they really want to do that, but I think that's sort of where both sides were thinking in this.
See, and the reason why I think nothing's going to happen is because in order to go that route of we can get Wilson out of here, get some value out of him, and then build something else with a run first, tough defense style team. I just don't think it could work for them because it's going to take them a while to build up that offensive line. That offensive line is really bad. Even though they were ranked 12th in rushing offense this last season, about half of that was because of Russell Wilson. And the only reason that he really wants to get out and scramble anymore is when he's under pressure. It's not what he's looking to do. He wants to pass the ball, but ultimately he wants to, run the ball, have an effective run game with the running backs, not with him, and then eventually pass when he has to or when he sees the opportunity.
And actually, the other thing about it is, if you look at it, Russell Wilson's deal is actually not all that bad. It's about $32 million cap hit this year. It's $19 million in salary, $13 million in signing bonus, $32 million for a let's go top 8 quarterback. I think that's a pretty good deal, especially with the way these quarterback salaries. You're talking you might be paying Dak $40 million, $45 million in the upcoming seasons. Now, a little bit of that is skewed because we were basing that on the cap continuing to rise up like it had been, and due to COVID, the cap sort of skewed a little bit back. But, I assume they'll get that money back in the next year or two once we get back to normal. And really, you got a halfway decent deal with Russell Wilson for the next couple of years. Now, the deal after that, you might not be getting quite the bargain.
Yeah, that's obviously when you have to kind of start looking at your quarterback situation a little bit deeper. But I think for now, obviously, I don't think they're making any moves or I don't think Wilson's going anywhere.
Yeah. Well, I just, Jimmy Garoppolo's cap hit is $26 million. Russell Wilson's is $32 for $6 extra million. I think Russell's probably worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's move on to the San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers season was pretty much just a waste. Injuries on both sides of the ball pretty much crippled their whole season. 6-10 overall, 4th in the Nfc West. It'll be hard to really recap this season because basically this season was just crushed from the very word go by injuries. The only thing I could say is I really, really thought this team played hard and played well, despite what, was out on the field, which wasn't capable to beat NFL teams by the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, their season ended kind of in a disappointment. They faced off against the Seahawks. They had a chance to, really impact the Seahawks going into the playoffs, which I think they kind of did. Even though they lost that game, I think that they really kind of put hurt on those boys and really showed them to listen. You're not unbeatable. Just because you're winning this division doesn't mean you can't be beat. But they played tough all season long, even with the amount of injuries they sustained. It was a really unfortunate season for 49er fans, but there were some high points. There were some situations like the fact that they not just went into LA, but when they hosted LA, they were able to, really hand it to them. They played really tough against some really good teams. Now, they did fall short in certain occasions. Now, a lot of it had to do with injuries and things like that. But overall, I think that even at 6-10, I think that I would consider this season somewhat of a success because of all the adversity and all the hurdles that they were able to overcome.
Yeah, I do have a optimism about next year. I'm very, very interested to see how this NFC West plays out because I think there are three at least really good teams in there for sure. If San Francisco can get back to full health, which I assume they can. The thing I probably thought was best about the San Francisco season was their draft. Kinlaw and Ayuk, their two first-round picks, were really, really impactful draft candidates. And if you can get them both healthy at the same time, Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, I think the only game they were both healthy at the same time might have been that Rams game where they seemingly schemed their way to destroying the Rams in that one. But Kinlaw, after trading DeForest Buckner to the Colts, just sort of picked up right where Buckner left off. And I really liked Kinlaw this year. You get him going. I just think this Niners team really, really could be something to deal with next season.
Yeah, definitely. Now they do have some issues that they have to figure out. At the end of the last season, they ended up 15th in total offense and fifth in total defense. This is according to ESPN.com. But they have some issues going into the offseason. The main one, in my opinion, is the cornerback situation. The 49ers currently have no corners under contract going into next season. So that's something they obviously have to fix because last time I checked, you need corners to play this game.
Yeah.
Um,
I was going to ask, they have about, let's go 12 to 14 million in cap space. Richard Sherman is a free agent.
and he's not coming back.
Yeah, I don't think I'd pay him to come back either. I think his time is probably done. There are a couple of free agents on the market. The one up in Seattle probably would be a nice pickup, but there are a handful of others. It's a solid cornerback draft overall. Would you go more free agent route or would you go more draft route? The draft route you can get cheap, but throwing rookie corners out there might be a little scary from time to time.
Yeah, to me, the cornerback situation is one of those where there's only a handful of guys that I would really pay, big money to. And obviously, one of them's already with the Rams and Jalen Ramsey. So there's really only a handful of guys, and I don't see anybody hitting free agency this offseason that would cause me to really go out and spend big money on them. So if I had to do anything as a 49er executive, I would probably go through the draft and try to draft somebody that we could develop. They do have Witherspoon that, they can kind of get there and keep, but they would also need to add some depth to that. So I think that adding someone young, because Richard Sherman's not coming back. He publicly already made it clear that he wasn't going to come back. So I don't know what the situation is there. I don't see any type of Seattle cornerback going to San Francisco, especially with Richard Sherman seemingly having like a sour taste in his mouth from his time there. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I would go to the draft though if I was them.
Yeah, probably the two best quarterback free agents, Patrick Peterson at 31, was a lockdown corner. I don't know if he's quite a lockdown corner. I definitely put him up there as a solid corner. And A.J. Bouye, who you probably know as Jalen Ramsey's teammate in Jacksonville. That was quite a good defense once upon a time. But I don't know if I'd pay Bouye either. He tends to get beat really big.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, there's, definitely a bunch of other guys that I think probably have some value, but there's only a handful of guys that I would really pay big money to. So if I had to, kind of address that situation, like I said, I would probably make sure that I've got Witherspoon at least for the time being, and then get some young guys through the draft and see if I can develop them.
Yeah, I think if they can get that situation handled, the defensive line will be just fine. The linebackers will be just fine. I think the offense will be just fine, except for one position.
Let's hear it.
We got to talk about the position here. Jimmy Garoppolo goes in. I believe most of his guaranteed money is, gone after this season. It's this season, and then he's essentially you can cut him without any hit to the cap. Would you trust this season with Jimmy Garoppolo? There have been rumors of them going out and getting new quarterbacks. Where are you looking here? Do you trust Jimmy G? It was sort of a lost season. He did make a Super Bowl 2 years ago. Can you win a Super Bowl with him? I don't know. I was curious on your take here.
Okay, so for me personally, if I was a 49er fan or an executive, to me, quarterback situation is last on my list of priorities. It's the last thing that I'm concerned about. I know they had an injury carousel last season, and some people want to change, but I think Jimmy's a good quarterback. And again, this is coming from a guy whose team was led to the Super Bowl by a guy named Jared Goff. So what do I know? But if San Fran cut Jimmy, they'd be 7 ton in cap space. I think it's around 23.5 million or
It's
something
actually
like
26.4, and his
that.
dead. I was wrong. I thought it was next year. It's this year. His dead cap money is only 2.8. So essentially, you'd save 24 million if you cut him.
So I mean, it's definitely a lot of money. But my concern then becomes, who are we signing? Where's the big improvement?
Yeah.
I'm looking at the free agency market, and I don't really see anything that makes me think like, okay, we're gonna save a ton of money and we can use it to acquire this guy that's going to be an improvement. I don't see that out there in the market right now. So for me, this is kind of like a one last year type of situation with Jimmy. I think you kind of just write it out. That team was plagued with injuries last season, is one of the reasons why they performed so poorly. But I think that if they somehow manage to stay healthy, they can, spend money wisely and improve what I think is a sneaky good team. So I personally wouldn't move them.
Yeah.
Unless, sorry to cut you off, but unless a Deshaun Watson came up.
I was going to say, if Watson, now you might have to trade half your team to them, plus your draft for the next 10 years. So I don't know if that, the ones that pop up, are Sam Darnold with the Jets staring down quarterbacks. Trubisky might be available. You'd look maybe Drew Lock, depending what the Broncos do. There's a lot of heat coming from the Atlanta Falcons that they're going to draft a quarterback, so maybe a Matt Ryan in there. There's a handful of others, Derek Carr. None of these guys are technically free right this second. But
Yeah, I know. But like I said, even with those potential guys being available,
you
are they
wouldn't.
really that big of an upgrade
No.
compared to Jimmy?
The only one I might,
To a healthy Jimmy.
yes. The only one I might stare at a little harder might be a Matt Ryan in there.
Yeah, I could see that. But I mean, Jimmy already kind of has a rapport with Kittle, and his wide receivers are young and they kind of like the system that they're in. I don't know. To me, it's a question of, do you really want to make a change right now to what might not even be that big of a leap?
Yeah. All right. What do you see for San Francisco? Are you looking at them like I'm looking at them and think next year they might be back in their contender status again?
Yeah, I'm kind of definitely more on that side of the fence, but I like I said, there's some issues that I think they need to address. Like I said, that first issue being the cornerback situation. They don't have any cornerbacks, and then the defensive end position. They have two defensive ends that are scheduled to become free agents, and then they're also handcuffed, to that contract, which is a really bad contract. But I don't know if D Ford's going to be ready to play during the beginning of the season, which I don't think he will be.
No, I think D Ford's probably borderline in retirement zone right now.
Yeah, and if D Ford's not going to be available to start off the season, I just think that you have to invest a little bit of money either through or free agency or through the draft. You got to get some more guys to help out Boza because Boza can't really take on all that on himself. He's a good player, but he needs some help. So they're gonna have to bring some guys on defensive end and on cornerback. And I think that if they do that, they should be solid going forward.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the Los Angeles Rams, your boys. Mixed results season. We were excited about them. We were sad about them. We were thinking they weren't going to make the playoffs there for a half second. And then they made the playoffs, had a really nice win, and they probably went about as far as they could go with how the season unfolded. 10-6 season, second in the Nfc West. Lost in the semifinal round to the Green Bay Packers. Up and down season, I think we'd probably go with. What did you make of the Los Angeles Rams season?
Well, like you said a little bit earlier about the Seattle Seahawks, I think it's more fitting in this position talking about the Rams. And that's Jekyll and Hyde. That's exactly what they were this season. At some point, they almost had a little pattern going on with wins and losses, but I still think overall it was a successful season. At some point, they were within striking distance of winning the division, which they eventually lost to the Seattle Seahawks, which they came back and beat them in the wild card round, eventually losing to Green Bay 18-32 in the divisional playoffs. But overall success, I think they probably could have played better. And I probably, I know for a fact that they wish they would have played better. It probably would have changed the outcome of this offseason in what they're calling the big blockbuster trade for the NFC West, which is where they send Jared Goff over to Detroit in exchange for Matthew Stafford.
Stafford.
Yeah, I was gonna say
you were right.
You're talking about Matt Ryan, and he was stuck in my head. But yeah, in exchange for Stafford,
you might rather have him. I don't know.
Listen, I won't get into it. I'm gonna be supportive. I'm a Stafford guy now. All of a sudden,
we're getting you a jersey.
Oh yeah, no, I never.
The camo one.
No. But
you're wearing it every week during the regular season when we do the show.
I'll stick to this because then there's no expectations for anybody to play well. And then I can just say, I knew that guy was going to do good. That's why I wore my Rams gear. But yeah, kind of a underwhelming regular season, but a pretty inspiring, I guess I'd call it, off season where they, no one really expected them to get to that point. No one expected them to get past the Seahawks, and they somehow muscled their way through, but obviously they weren't enough to compete with the elite teams.
Yeah. I think, when everybody was healthy and they looked like they were clicking, probably up to about week 12, I think we thought, yeah, they have a chance to make it here. I don't think either of us were on the Goff total hatred train quite yet. I think we were a little disappointed in some games, but I think we both thought this team could make the Super Bowl, and something just went bad with Goff, with their coach. The defense held it together, and then he got hurt, and, really making to the second round of the playoffs by what that roster was by that time, you were probably like, yeah, that's a pretty solid season. Goff had a pin in his thumb. Donald was hurt. And if anything, I think we all see that Aaron Donald needs to be healthy for this defense to function fully or trouble begins to happen. That's where I probably we should start looking at next year, because next year is really the all-in season for the Rams. They made the trade for Goff to Stafford. I'm not sure how much of a difference or upgrade that really is. Stafford's numbers look much better than Jared Goff's, but it will be funny if Jared Goff ends up in the Lions and racking up a bunch of Matt Stafford numbers all of a sudden.
Now, when it comes to Matthew Stafford, I'm not sure how much of an upgrade it actually is compared to Jared Goff. I do think it's an upgrade. I just don't know how much of an upgrade it is. I do think that the upgrade we do get with Matthew Stafford is that confidence level. That's one thing that I really didn't see from Jared Goff on a consistent basis last season. And you heard me kind of rambling about it as a Rams fan. There were games when Jared Goff just kind of looked distraught and, kind of disappointed that things weren't going as, he wanted them to go. And it almost felt like he's been spoiled by the way McVay's kind of set up that offense for him, where he's made it really simple for him. At some point, we knew that McVay was in his ear basically till just right about the snap of the ball. So um, I don't know if he got kind of used to having everything handed to him, and I don't want to say that about him. I respect him as a player and as a person, but I do think that Matthew Stafford does bring more confidence. We see it from him even when he's on a bad team, that he always goes out there and he feels like he's going to win no matter what. So that's where I think we get an upgrade. But overall, I don't know how much better he will be, but we don't really need him to be much better. We just need him to not make the same mistakes that Goff made.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe this is just not necessarily a better quarterback being brought in, but two guys who probably need a reset. Jared Goff probably needs a reset. I don't know if the Lions are the reset you really necessarily want, but, he went to Cal when Cal was resetting, so maybe being off in anonymity will help him out, and he'll put up bad stats and never win a game for probably the rest of his career. And Stafford gets a chance to show if he's actually a winner in this league, or all his stats are pretty much meaningless. And when he gets in the Hall of Fame, we'll all sort of snicker because we all know he wasn't really any good, but somehow he accumulated a bunch of stats. Now, acquiring him was very costly. You get a little salary cap release. You can technically dump Stafford next year, and you had Goff for another 2 years on that cap. But you gave up some first-round picks. I'm not sure if you're drafting in the first round, possibly ever again. Maybe not till they move back to St. Louis.
Oh, gosh.
What is your take there? I mean, you saw it in this recent draft. I didn't think it was a great draft for the Rams. The Cam Akers pick was a solid pick, but that was a second-round pick. I don't make much of Van Jefferson. They'll probably release Reynolds for cap things, and he'll take over, Reynolds' role. Everything else was sort of not really that much, other than Jordan Fuller was a nice pickup. No draft picks. You're capped out pretty much in the negatives. You're going to have to shed money. Is it worth it to go broke and then maybe in 3 years you're on a 4-win team for the next 5 years?
See, I don't know. To me, it seems like I said the NFL is headed in this direction where teams are really kind of going all in, for a small window of years, and then they kind of reset and then they restart over again. I hope that's not the case with the Rams. Obviously, as a fan, I want to see it to be. I want to see a more consistent type of winner. Now, whether that's going to happen or not, that remains to be seen. But I think that they're going to have to make a lot of their roster moves now through the draft, and that's going to be in the later rounds, obviously, because they don't have a first round pick. They don't have a first round pick until 2024. And they haven't had one since 2016. So that goes to show you the way this team has kind of been operating as of late. But I think they can find some value. I think that, their scouts are good enough to find some value in those later rounds.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I actually think this team has drafted halfway decent. Taking away those draft picks just seems like a way to get cheap talent if your scouting department is really good, which they have been. If you look at players like Cooper Kupp and Fuller, who came in this year, it just seems a waste to give those up when you have such a good scouting department, it looks like.
Yeah, I think right now the way this team is kind of set up and the way that they're structurally set, I believe that they're between 28 and 34 million over the cap.
Yes,
so they
correct.
definitely have to shed a lot of money. There's a lot of money that has to be shed. They took a big hit in giving away those draft picks. Obviously, you never really want to give away first round picks, but there's some analytics junkies out there that really say that first round pick's actually not good for you. Because you end up paying a higher value for something that's still unproven and might not work out. So Who knows? I don't know what to believe in that situation, but I do know that they need some help on that offensive line. Um, Austin Blythe is due to become a free agent during the offseason. Uh, but as much as I like the guy, you can upgrade that position for a lot cheaper also
Yes.
by adding someone through the draft. You also do need to add some depth to that offensive line because of Whitworth. As much as I like him, as great as he's been during his journey as a Cincinnati Bengal and as a Ram later on in his career, he's about to turn 40, I believe. Um, and even though he's been solid and he has been dealing with injuries. So I think that you have to start kind of find a way to shore up that line, especially if you're going to give Stafford some time to find those receivers. But I think that they're solidly built. They don't have to do a lot of things. What they're really going to have to do is plug in a lot of the holes with cheap guys, and if they can do that and find a way to make it work, then I think that they'll have a pretty good season.
Yeah, part of that line, I think Rob Havenstein's going to probably get cut. Maybe they could rework his deal, but if they cut him, they save about $5 million there. You were talking about Whitworth. He wouldn't only save about $1 or $2 million if they cut him, so it wouldn't probably be a whole lot of value. I was looking, and they don't have a ton of free agents. I really like the way Leonard Floyd played. They're probably zero chance you'll be able to bring back Leonard Floyd at all. And, those analytic guys say those things about the first round pick, and then you look at the Rams, and right now they're built off Donald, Ramsey, and technically Matthew Stafford. So
Technically first round picks. So.
all first round picks. Now Cooper Kupp is all wonderful and good, but it just sort of you need those really blue chip level guys, and those blue chip level guys aren't really coming in third, fourth, fifth round picks. Needless to say, I do think this is probably, I don't know if I go my favorite to win the NFC going into next year, but they're definitely going to be one of my top three teams to win the NFC next year. The problem with that, though, is I think we saw it with the 49ers last year and a little bit with the Saints this year. When you do this all in style, if injuries start to come up, you have no depth, and you can't even tread water, really, like the Niners. Once those frontline guys went out, they don't have backups because they're paying too much money to those frontline guys. And technically speaking, the all-in strategy worked with the Saints. Not the Saints. It didn't work with the Saints. It worked with the Bucs, but also, it didn't totally work with the Bucs because their defense was built on their draft picks of Devin White and Vita Veda, and so, it's half and half. You still need those cheap draft picks in there. I do like what the Rams are doing. The Super Bowl's here. You try to go for it, maybe this year, maybe next year, and just hope for health.
Yeah, well, obviously their window is now. And we don't know how long those windows remain open for. If you look at the way the team is structured, salary-wise, they've got a couple years left to really hit that window. But they'd like for it to be now, with the Super Bowl being held in LA. I think that to be the second team to win or to make it to the Super Bowl when it's at home, I think would be in their interest and in their plans. Now, that can they make that happen? That sort of remains to be seen.
Yeah. All right. Enough on the Rams. Enough on their all-in. Let's go to possibly the weirdest team in the NFC West. I don't totally know what to make of them at all. The Arizona Cardinals. I don't know if they had a disappointing season or a good season. I think their season probably was about what I thought they were. A lot of people had very high expectations, but I think if your coach is Cliff Kingsbury, 8-8's probably about where you'd go. Did not qualify for the playoffs. I think a lot of people would. Kyler Murray, good and bad. I don't know if necessarily he's a elite level quarterback. I do think he's a solid NFL quarterback. What did you make of this Arizona Cardinals season?
Well, I hate to say it, but I kind of called this team pretty early on in, the regular season when everybody was really hyped about them and thought that they could contend for, NFC West champs and, possibly be like the new face of that division. I kind of said that I didn't think that they were ready, that I didn't think that they were really ready to take that leap forward. And I predicted that they would eventually kind of collapse. Now, it wasn't a full on collapse. They did end up 8-8. I guess that's somewhat respectable. But I think their biggest flaw was the divisional games. They went 2-4 within the division, even though they ranked sixth in total offense and 13th in total defense. And this is according to ESPN.com. But they had some hiccups, and it was really obvious when it came to playing against those teams that know uh, fundamentally how the Cardinals are built, and they were able to really kind of game plan against them. They don't have all the pieces in place to take that next leap. Um, so I would say overall, probably a disappointing season for the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, I guess we could look at it as a disappointment, but really, I don't know. They always look to be, second,
8-8.
third. Yeah, 8-8.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, if I go back and listen to my win total one, I probably went under, so it might even have been like a 7-6 win team. I thought they'd be. You mentioned their division record. How much do you see that improving going into next year, though?
Listen,
The
it's
Rams
tough.
supposedly got better. The Niners, we guess, will be better. And my guess is the Seahawks don't magically get bad all of a sudden. So this team might be in a regression off the 8-8.
Yeah, on paper, every team gets better, during each offseason because that's essentially what the offseason is for. It's not to, make your team worse, it's to make your team better. So essentially every team does kind of improve on what they were last season. But if that holds true, then you have the Rams improving, you have the Niners improving, the Seahawks improving. Even if the Cardinals do improve, can they improve enough to get past those guys or at least leapfrog one or two of them and potentially make a playoff run? Now, I think it's possible with the type of players that they have, but I do think that there's certain things that they're going to have to address when it comes to the offseason. Um, Number one, I think they're going to have to address the fact that they're going to need to get Fitzgerald. I'm sorry, not Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald possibly on his way out. Still hasn't officially decided, but they have to get Hopkins some help. Um, they also need to get Murray some help in the form of being able to protect him a little bit more. Um, they don't have any other real threat weapons outside of Hopkins and Murray being able to run the ball. So it makes him really one dimensional and it makes him easy to expose. So I think they need to probably add some sort of tight end, to the mix, somebody that's kind of really well rounded and can kind of attack a team in multiple facets, whether it be blocking for the running backs or, kind of getting out there and running routes. I think adding things like that would eventually help this team out enough to possibly leapfrog one or two of those other teams in the division.
Yeah, curious about Patrick Peterson. He's a free agent. He's been a mainstay on the Cardinals. They have about 15 million or so in cap space. Would you try to re-sign him? I mean, the elite level corner, probably about 12 to 15 million per year, give or take. Or do you let him walk and he's had good, probably 10 years there?
Yeah, when I was kind of debating this cornerback situation, I was torn because I do think that Peterson is a solid corner. I think that he plays really solid when it comes to that secondary, but he's not what he once was. He's not the type of playmaker that he once was. And again, this is not a slight towards him or anything like that. I still think he's a solid player, but he's not elite in my opinion. And I think that in order to get him to the point where he's contributing, to a really good extent, you need to bring in some help. Now, obviously, I don't know what his situation is. I don't know if he'd be willing to give the Cardinals a hometown discount because I think that if he's demanding whatever top dollar he can demand. I don't think it's really wise of the Cardinals to re-sign him, especially long term. At that point, I would kind of wait, see what hits free agency, and then maybe we can kind of work out something to where we bring in guys at a lower rate, so that we can take some of that money, some of that cap room, and put it towards other positions that I think would really help this team out in the long run.
Yeah, well, I think defensively there are a handful of decisions to be made. What to do with Patrick Peterson, Hassan Reddick, who was probably their best pass rusher out of the linebacker position, is a free agent. That's probably about $15 million. Also for his, a year for his deal. Now you can go the franchise route, but you do that, you probably have to cut one of your other linebacker guys. Chandler Jones will probably be looking for an extension as well. That could help if you extend him on the salary cap hit he takes this year. But draft-wise, I must say I was a little disappointed. I don't know if I was disappointed in him or their usage of him, but Isaiah Simmons, the Clemson, I don't even know what to call him. Technically is a linebacker, but he can play safety. He can rush. He's, sort of the Jamal Adams type.
Hey, it's a hybrid guy.
Yeah, but they didn't seem to utilize him at all during the first 10 to 12 games. He started to play a little more at the back end, but I don't know. It just seems like they don't know how to use him. I watched him in college, and I think this guy is an elite level playmaker that you have to get on the field, but maybe he's just not that good, or do you think Arizona just, it takes a special sort of defensive mind to understand how to utilize somebody like his skill set?
I don't know exactly if they see what they potentially have. I don't get to, really go deep into the Cardinals, but I think that he's got the potential to be a special player. Now, I don't know if it's the coaching staff that doesn't really know how to utilize him, like you said, or if it's just the fact that he's really not as good as some people believe. I think he is. And I think that they possibly see that in him, which is one of the reasons why they're going the route that they're going. Um, I think one of the biggest issues around this team is going to be the fact that they have to get more weapons on offense, because overall they ended up 17th in total passing yards per game, which when you think of a guy like Hopkins, you kind of expect it to have you expect the team to have a really good passing attack. So to be in the bottom half of the leaders, I don't think is good enough. I think they need to add some depth to the wide receiver position. And I think even a tight end is probably, in my opinion, a better place to spend that money, as opposed to, I know you need defense, but their defense really wasn't that bad.
No.
I think their offense really could have helped them out.
But that's
more.
where it gets weird if they start releasing those guys who are on the defensive end to spend on offense. the defense might become bad unless you learn how to utilize somebody like Isaiah Simmons.
That's what I'm. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say this hybrid thing. I just feel like if he was on the Patriots, we'd probably be having Sports Center specials, diagramming on how much of a genius Bill Belichick is. I just don't know if the Cardinals are creative enough to sort of utilize him, and he might just be a wasteland there. There's another guy in the draft like that out of Notre Dame coming up that I'm curious just to see what team he goes to and see if teams can sort of figure out how to utilize these guys who aren't just, Mike Singletary, middle linebacker, plant them in the middle of the field. They eat a bunch of tackles. You need to move them around and utilize them in different skill sets.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain teams that really know how to use those players, and I think the Cardinals probably feel like they could, really get some play out of him. So I think that they're going to stick with him. I think that they're going to try something out. Maybe they have, something in mind as far as how to utilize him, how to get the best out of his, particular skill set. I know that the Rams tried something like that last season when they brought in former safety and they had him at linebacker, trying to guard those faster tight ends, that kind of crossed right down the middle. Those guys that really were originally mismatch problems because they could run so fast, but yet they were big, and utilize them in positions like that. So we'll see what happens going forward. But like I said, I think that they probably need to address certain areas of that offense first before they can take the next leap into that, being better in that division.
All right, let me wrap up with two questions. Let's go with the easy one first. Cliff, what do you make of him? He I'm I'm probably just a hater, but he was bad as a college coach. He has not proven to be all that great as an NFL coach. I just don't understand what's there and why he continues to get chances as a coach in this league or in the college league for that matter.
Now, I will say this: the guy probably knows a lot more about football than a lot of us combined.
That's fine, but can he
He
coach it?
listen, he's got what some people would call a very unique football IQ. His the way he sees the game is very unique. Now, he hasn't been able to really translate that on to on the field performances, but he's a young guy. His future hasn't been written yet. I think that he still has the ability to prove something. He does play in the NFC West. The NFC West is probably the toughest division in football. He does play in the NFC, in my opinion, probably a little bit tougher than the AFC. So it's hard to really, criticize the guy. I know you're not criticizing him, but it's really hard to sit here and just kind of lash out on him when, he's going up against this really tough competition. Like I said, I think that they're probably a few key strategic pieces away from really being contenders. So maybe he's got it in, and maybe this is his season. Obviously, that'll still remains to be seen, and we'll see what happens. But I think he's got something.
Yeah. Okay. You're a Cliff believer for right now.
I'm just a nice guy. I'm
I
just a nice guy.
I'm telling you now. Worst coach of the week is already tuning up for him next season.
I don't think he was ever worst coach of the week, was he?
I probably had him in there once or twice for some strange decisions he's making at the end of games. But Cliff is low level fruit. I'm going to go and pick a little higher and might get some hate here. I'm not sold on Kyler Murray. It looks fancy when he does, cool things, and he, every third throw he makes some dynamite throw. But I'm not 100% sold. I'm just curious on your feelings here. I mean, I'm not in the mode of give up on him, cut him, draft somebody new, though they were pretty quick to do that with Josh Rosen. So, there haven't been all that many more wins with Kyler there either. So I'm just curious on your take on Kyler.
Okay, listen, I like him. I like him. I think he's really spunky. He's exciting to watch.
I think that's just because you've been watching Jared Goff stand in quicksand for 5 years.
He's the complete opposite of a Jared Goff. Okay, but no, he's entertaining. He's got skill. I think that his biggest downfall is, like I said, that team isn't quite complete yet, and he's so explosive, and we've seen him make such interesting and entertaining plays that we expect him to be at this level of performance when realistically what he's got to work with, it's good, but as a complete unit it's more like down here. um, I think that if they really built that offense up the way that it should be functioning, where they have a complimentary guy that they can put in the slot, or he could be opposite of Hopkins. If they can get themselves a tight end that can not only block and help that running game, but can also kind of get out, and run across the middle and go after catches, especially in the end zone. Um, I think it's going to help them out. It's going to help the run game. If it helps the run game, it's going to help the quarterback in the passing game. So it all relates. It all kind of falls into pieces. So I think that yes, maybe underwhelming, but I think it's partially because of the way the team is being set up. It's not quite built yet. It's like a high rise. You see the shape taking form, but they haven't put in the final top executive floors yet. So I still think there's time.
All right, lover of Cliff and lover of Kyler. I'll just have you know they're already on the visual for worst of the week already. All right, that wraps up our NFC West season recap. What are we going to do next? What conference?
I don't know. I was going to sit here and kind of give it to you. I know there's been a little bit of chatter and a little bit of movement here and there, so we might have to jump around. What are you thinking?
We want to hit up the Colts division and get out on Carson Wentz. We want to hit up the NFC East and how terrible all those teams are going to be.
Okay, so let's say we did an NFC team. I think we should probably jump over to an AFC team.
Let's hit up the AFC South, the division of kings.
We started today with what would have been the biggest cap hit in NFL history with Jared Goff and the Rams. If it wasn't for this guy who ended up in Indianapolis, and that's Carson Wentz.
All right. So next week, we're going to hit up the AFC South and see how that division breaks down. That should be a fun one.
Yeah, I'm probably going to have to get with Dynamite and feel what his take is. I believe that the Titans are going to end up in the Super Bowl again.
Well, he'll probably tell you the seventh string corner on the team is making real progress, and they should be shut down, lockdown guys. So take that for what you will.
Yeah, he's always got the inside information, so I'm going to him.
All right, buddy. Where can we find Achilles Reign?
As always, you can find me on Twitter at TD Achilles.
I'm GLN Champ 5 on Twitter and Instagram. You can find us on greenlightnetwork.org, Greenlight Network on Facebook, and Greenlight Network on YouTube. That's our show, and we're out.